Oh, yeah, fam. Welcome back to the Combo Couch, everyone. I am Pasta Jordula.
And I'm Fiorella.
And Fiorella, why are you smirking?
Because you're a lot.
And guess what? You love it. Everybody knows fam needs her fam-a-lamb. Guys, tomorrow, just so you know, I have a very, very busy day tomorrow, fam. I feel like you, with all these appearances and all these shows, tomorrow night, I'm going to work our way backwards, okay? Tomorrow night, Steve Cutler live, Lucky Burrito, the Fearlessly Authentic Thursday show, fam. That's what's going on. I'm
Wow.
going to be on that show tomorrow at 6 p.m., hanging out with Lucky Burrito. Lucky is one of our moderators along with Jilly Love and whatnot. So we love them, and I will be on that show tomorrow night at 6, fam. But before that, at 11 o'clock, following the morning show, which of y'all know I do, I will be on Roar Media, and I will be on Shanda Master's show. My homegirl over there, you know Roar Media. Fam, look at you. You're on their thumbnail that's pinned to Roar Media. Support women and independent media. We got Amber, Shanda, and Fee. So that will be taking place following the morning show. And the morning show I'll be on tomorrow. We'll have some guests on from Perth, which is Western Australia, talking about the emergency laws, fam. The COVID crap has not stopped. We'll be talking about that on the show. But before that, fam, guess what I'll be on before the morning show?
Jesus Christ. What?
Crosstalk. I'll be on my second episode of Crosstalk. Ooh. This is the follow-up episode with Dennis Kucinich tomorrow, and another nice lady, I forgot her name, Republican strategist, and I want to hear what she's got to say tomorrow. We'll be doing a little bit talking about what's going on in the election system here. Fam, you get your vote sticker? Did you get your vote sticker? I got my vote sticker, fam.
Fam, I did not vote. So,
fam,
no.
What do you mean? You didn't go to Moscow and vote? I have my I voted sticker right there, if you can see. Right there. The Vegas got the cool ones because it's got like the Vegas.
Do you really want me to go on a rant of how, okay, we can save that for later.
Now, let me make it bigger for you, fam.
Fam, your vote doesn't count, okay?
Fam.
It doesn't count.
I
think it's a waste of time.
I am not going to let them take the process away from me. Voting.
They already did.
The people. Well, I'm taking it back.
If voting made any difference, they wouldn't encourage you to do it, fam. They really wouldn't. Not these people. Not these people. I'm sorry.
I know. Well, yeah, I'm not going to let them take away our practices and our principles. Elections belong to the people, fam.
Yeah, well, they don't belong to the people right now in the United States. So anyway, we can argue about that in a little bit. Okay.
Yes. One little thing for the elections in the United States. Ooh, sorry, fam. Get right into it. I'll let you take the microphone.
Okay, so in about 30 minutes, a little less, we have a guest. We have my colleague Dawn. Dawn did a documentary called 8 Years Before, and it was about 8 years that people in the Donbass endured before anybody knew anything about the Donbass or the Euromaidan that happened. So his documentary is good. I haven't finished all of it, but I saw the first part, and it's really well done. It's on the ground stuff. So we're gonna have him come on to talk about that. But first, let's talk about what's been on everybody's minds in terms of Russia, Ukraine, right?
Yeah.
So breaking news, Russia is going to leave Kherson. And this, of course, has been pretty much really a lot of people are upset, not just the Western media is, of course, eating this up, saying the Russia's done, this is it, blah blah blah. So I'm going to give you a completely different take on this than what's probably been out there. Maybe a few others that might agree with me might have a similar take. But
I have a question. So
yeah,
what really happened is going to make Sean Penn happy that he gave his fucking Oscar to Zelensky.
Yeah.
And because he's going to spin this and say, like, we told you, because he said a long time ago, Ukraine will win this war. They will win this war. He said that. So, I mean.
Yeah. So, this does not mean the war is over, unfortunately, in those terms. I mean, but so can you make it bigger? Please?
Oh, sorry. My bad. Sorry. Yeah, I'll make it real big.
Thank you.
Put us right.
Okay. So this is a thread I did on Twitter. And basically, this is what was said directly from the meeting with Sorovikin and Shoigu.
Hmm.
Okay. And he said that Russia doesn't find it wise to stay in there. Basically, they think they're going to go through a loss of life, right? And in the region of the Kherson, they have a lot of support. Like you guys know, they were part of the referendum, right? The population is between 300,000 to 400,000 people there. Okay, and so according to Sorovkin, Kherson and the adjacent areas cannot be fully supplied and function, meaning that it would be more trouble than it's worth to continue supplying weapons and defending Kherson. People are dying, and they're constantly in danger from Ukraine. Okay, so that was the beginning of the conversation, and you can just continue scrolling. So around 115,000 people have already been evacuated, but like I said, there is more, right? And they have been encouraging people to evacuate Kherson for the last few days. They've been telling people to leave. This has been happening. This has been happening for a while now. Okay. The remaining troops are going to go to the left bank of the Dnieper River, right? And the remaining withdrawal of the troops and remaining civilians needs to be carried out ASAP. Why? Well, because we know what happens when Russia leaves an area, right? Once Ukraine comes in, what do? They torture whoever's left. This has been on the minds of so many people
Yeah.
that have been upset. And I was having a conversation with two of my good female journalists, and this is really the issue that really tugs at the heart of people, because at the end of the day, the only people that matter in a war are the civilians, right? And the
Yes.
people that are civilians that are made into soldiers that go fight these wars. And these are the people that always end up suffering the most. They get caught in between the situation. And like I said, Kherson overwhelmingly voted to be a part of the Russian Federation. So you have the vast majority of these people that are pro-Russia, okay? And so they need to get out, because when they don't get out, it's not going to be nice for them. Did you want to say something before I continue?
Well, I have some questions. I said the question number one is that you had mentioned that this was a military decision earlier, not a
Yeah.
political decision. Could you go a little bit more into that and the differences between what a military position decision is and a political position? Because I would think that every single military decision is a political decision, but you were saying something to the fact about the way Russia's not good with that kind of playing that game.
Russia's not good at PR at all.
At all.
Yeah.
Scott Ritter says this shit all the time. Can you give a little
Yeah.
bit of an example of why this is more of a
Caitlin.
military decision, not a political decision?
Yeah. So this is if you can go back to the thread. But I'll start with this. So this is more of a military decision, a logical decision. Why? Because this is from a logical perspective, they would be losing. If they stayed in Kherson, they would have a chance to lose more men and to be stuck in this situation when they don't really need to be there. They can go and then come back and get it at another time. And this is more of a difficult situation because in the back of the minds, I mean, I think Russians know, in spite of being bad at PR, that this is going to look to the West like, oh, they're retreating, right? This is a surrender. Oh my God. But logistically, they don't need to necessarily be there. And they saw more of a loss militarily in terms of their weapons, in terms of most ardently, the thing they most emphasized was the life of men, the life of their soldiers. And they don't want to do that. Even though Ukraine has lost more, what did they say? I think at least eight more times of men than
Yes.
Russians have.
Yes.
Okay. So in spite of that, Russia knows that they don't have an endless supply of weapons like NATO. They know that they are trying to have minimal losses because their goal is to literally deteriorate and deplete Ukraine from these weapons. Okay. from the areas where their central weapons areas are, right? So the West is going to say, "Oh my God, this is like,
Yeah.
this is ridiculous," blah blah blah. But of course, Russia, from even other surrenders, right? Not surrenders, but retreats or areas they've left. They have always said this is how they think. This is not the first time this has happened. This literally, and I guarantee you, maybe it won't be the last, because this is how Russia thinks. Now, as far as politically, though, when people are emotional and they're viewing it like, oh my God, we want Russia to finish Ukraine. We want this, we want this to end. Why are they being like this? Blah, blah, blah. That's fair criticism to say that this makes Russia look weak. Absolutely fair criticism, 100%, because I understand the outside perspective of, okay, yeah, like, why is Russia doing this? This is dumb. They should care about the image. But they're never going to win that war with the West. Why? The West has literally censored all of our media. The West has, they're not going to win them at that game because the West is better. So they don't really pay attention to that. They're just paying attention to, okay, this is what we have militarily on the ground. This is what we're going to do. And we're just going to focus on on our mission, and everything else. That's that. So if you go back to where I was, because I wanted to make a, let's see.
This one, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so that one, right? Okay, yeah, they don't want to waste energy, right? They don't want to lose more people, because they don't want to take away from their fort. They're only using a small portion of their military. That's another criticism. They're not using enough of the military. Why? Well, they don't really want a full-fledged on scale war. However, it already is. In my opinion, I think they know that they're fighting the collective of NATO. At the same time, they're also not trying to escalate things. Unlike the West, they're trying to de-escalate. They don't want to take this further, because we know that the further this gets, the closer to nuclear war we are. And I do not see them as being the ones to just say, okay, blitzkrieg, we're just going to blow everybody up. And that's something that I think we're not used to seeing from the West. So if you just go down, I think we have that video, right?
I have a question though, because
Yeah.
this is kind of like going to the thing. Like you said that there are a lot of people in Russia, maybe, or is this just a general consensus
in
you're
the
getting from
forums,
online that
yeah,
want Russia to put down the iron fist? Like, in other words, like, Russia, why are you being so reserved? Why are you holding back?
right,
Enough
right.
is enough. Kick these guys' asses back into. They deserve it. They're the ones who took the fucking West in. They're the ones who armed
Yeah.
Nazis. They're the ones who killed innocent civilians. Stop it already, Putin. There was also this talk that Putin had hesitated, and I've said before that even when Yanukovych was getting sent out in a helicopter because they had the coup on the Maidan, that he even said that Putin, you're going to have to intervene. You're going to have to intervene early, because these people in the Donbass, they're going to be under pressure right away. They are hated by the Eastern Ukrainians. They want to take away their own culture and their language. That I've said he's been hesitant. Do we still get the same kind of feeling around, maybe from some people in your area and stuff? Because we definitely see it from pro-Russian personalities online that, come on, enough, Putin. Do what you got to do, boo. I don't mean to make that sound so campy when it's war, but I mean, there's a lot of feelings like that out there. I just want to address it. Go ahead, fam.
A lot of people who say these things are not at all anywhere near war. That's the problem, right? It's very easy to say, hey, why don't you just take out all of Ukraine, bomb these areas, blah, blah, blah. But you're not looking at the consequences of, if Russia does that, what will the West do? How will they frame it? They're looking at that. They're looking at, like, okay, if they do anything, you've seen how the West reacts, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, on top of that, you have the possibility of the dirty bomb, which has been denied by pretty much, I think the UN denied that there's any evidence. All of these, major political organizations have denied it. But Russia's saying no, like, we think that this is coming. So they don't want to put themselves in a situation where it'll be easier for something like a dirty bomb to happen. And that's also another element that's not talked about at all in terms of this this leaving of Kherson. And I just want to I do want to like continue though, because it is divisive. Like there are people here in Moscow who are like, why don't we just try to have a truce? Why don't we just try to settle? But the people who are in large support of the special military operation in Ukraine are the ones that are like, well, something's got to give. Sometimes Russians are were too
Reserved.
trusting, too
Yeah.
forgiving, too.
Forgiving.
And in my opinion, in my experience with Russians, I believe that is exactly how they are. And Dan said it himself, right? In meeting Russians, like they're so kind, and a lot of people have this image of Russians that's completely contradictory to that. But
Yeah.
it's just not the case.
Well,
They
to the
actually, and you
United
can
States,
see it in the way.
to that point, Fee, they have that attitude because the United States is probably the most Russophobic fucking place on the planet. Its media is Russophobic as can be. We get taken down for explaining the framework of elections, but Keith Olbermann can go on there and scream Russian scum and nothing happened to him. I mean, there's a reason why that we are this way. Our media, our culture, our movies. Right? Everything is all Russophobic. It is the most Russophobic place on the planet.
So I want you guys to hear this part. So the Russian forces are currently fighting on the eastern outskirts of Artyomovsk and Bakhmut, the Donetsk Republic, and West Russia. And the Ukrainian army has lost about 12,000 soldiers in October. Russia's losses are 7 to 8 times lower than the Ukrainian losses, and Kherson City in South Russia. So let's go ahead and hear what he has to say, the rest of this that I just read.
Fam, I'm going to mute us up real quick. I'll at least mute me up. And guys, thank you so much. Take a look at the screen. Convo Couch, we're on Rumble, guys. We're getting good Rumble numbers. Hook us up, share us out, do the thing.
Кроме того, на отдельных направлениях возобновили наступательные действия. На Донецком направлении завершили разгром противника на правом берегу реки Бахмутка, южнее Артемовска. В настоящее время ведутся активные действия по блокированию города с южного направления. Кроме того, на отдельных направлениях возобновили.
Okay, so this is what part of the conversation that took place between Sergei Shoigu and this guy right here. And so eventually they go on to agree that they're going to, in a few days, be completely off of Kherson. And if you go back to the tweet, there's a couple more things I want to point out here, which kind of leads us into the discussion of why this is so, the perspective could be very different, right? So scroll down a little bit.
Gotcha. I was just there too. Sorry. This one right here?
Yeah, so we kind of touched on that, right? People are emotional about this, both people who support Russia and obviously the people that don't. They're like claiming victory. And this is really important, right? And I just want to point this one out right here. This one is extremely important. People have made Russia to be this thing. A lot of anti-imperialists, a lot of people in the global south, in Africa, in Latin America, are looking at Russia as the one who took the initiative to take on the collective West. Because through taking on Ukraine, we know that Ukraine is propped up by NATO, right? And so everyone is kind of like, all the underdogs are sort of rooting for Russia. And they have this idea that Russia is they've put Russia on this pedestal of like, they can do no wrong, or like they're our only hope sort of thing, right? They've sort of fetishized Russia in this like, oh my God, they're going to save us from the global hegemonic West that's trying to destroy the very nature of our lives. Well, that's a lot of pressure to put on a group of people that have already lost 27 million fighting Nazis, right? Russia has known so much tragedy and history throughout the existence of its peoples, right? They're from the Soviet Union as well. And I don't think they realize just how many people all around the world have this sort of trust in them, this hope into actually facing the West. And they need to understand that Russians don't necessarily view themselves that way. They know that they're facing the collective West, but it's not like it was Putin's intention to go and put on a cape of Superman and go literally like, saber battle or become a Jedi, right, against the evil galactic empire. That was not his intention. I really don't think it was. And I think people have this idea that Russia has to like defeat all these people. And so I think that's where the emotions are coming, because they're like, well, if Russia's backtracking from Kherson, that means they might, something's going on, and all of this stuff starts
Yeah.
happening in your head where you're like, well, what happens if Russia loses? That means the West wins. And I think that's where this is coming from. And I get it. And I totally get it. But there is more to it than just like, our feelings and what we look at from the outside than what's happening logistically on the ground. It's really just up to, we're going to find out more. None of us know exactly what they're thinking,
Yeah.
but I can tell you culturally though, the way the East and Russians are Eurasian, right? So there's the Eastern culture thinks is completely different than the way we think. So I don't know if you wanted to comment on that.
Well, I just wanted to say, I said, fam, you made a comment about the fact that a lot of people feel that Russia was the one that just step up and collectively go, okay, let's go take on the West because enough is enough. I see it as more as if everything is playing out in front of us that is real, or, once again, not using it as the main point of the thesis, but there's always some thought process that, oligarchs are colluding in the back to manipulate what's going on in front of us to make us to not really tell us the truth. But if you just look at this on the surface level, I don't think it was a decision by Putin or the Russian Federation to say, okay, let's take on the West. It was like they were pushed back into a corner so much, especially with this whole Ukraine situation in Donbass, that they had no choice but to say, okay, it's time to saddle up and let's go. I mean, can we at least say that? I mean, I don't think it was a decision in the room like, all right, are we ready to take on the West? It was really like, holy cow, they're putting us in a corner to a point where we have no choice but to take on the West. No?
Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, that's that's exactly what I think happened. And we're going to talk about what exactly led to that decision and why it took so long too with our guest when he comes on, because I think that's an important part where I think a lot of people need to understand that this obviously didn't just come up as like a capricious decision. Oh, yeah, we're just going to go and fight, the collective West. Like,
Yeah.
this is not something you come to a decision on lightly, right? And I just want to finish up a couple things on that thread.
Okay. Tell me
If
which
you
part.
go
I'm going
back
to go
to
right
it.
to it.
Okay, so
We were right here. You want me to go to the next one right below it?
yeah. Just see. We talked about this, right? Russia's
Yep.
goal is to destroy the Ukrainian artillery, not necessarily conquer the land.
Absolutely.
Okay. And then so Zelensky's advisor said it's too early to talk about Russia's surrender to Kherson, but they have already talked about dividing the area into 3 different regions, which is again what people are afraid of, is the backlash for those who remain, right? So that's something to watch out for.
Yeah, but you did
Again,
mention that they did evacuate a lot of Russian.
they did, but there's a lot more people that
Okay.
were
You
pro-Russian.
said 115,000. If at 115,000, if the region's about 300,000 plus, that's a lot of people they got out.
Yeah, but I mean, still, that's still
gotcha.
maybe like a third.
All right. The next one is this. I'll put this up. Sorry, guys.
So Shoigu was the one to tell Sorovikin to pull Russian troops back from Kherson city, South Russia, to the other side of the Dnieper River, saying that the preserving the lives of the army personnel is a top priority. So that's what they're saying. That's what they're basing this on. And then if you go down the next one,
Yep.
basically, this is what I was kind of alluding to. A lot of the analysis has been very much black and white, right? This is even pro-Russian Westerners. It's just very, you have to understand the culture, the way this is being thought of is in a logical way. We don't have to necessarily agree with it, but also, it's harder to really assess it without understanding I think the cultural elements and the logistics too of war, which I mean, I'm no expert on the logistics of war, but based on what I know, and what I've been seeing these last few months, I'm not surprised that this was done necessarily, even though it seems on the surface like a really bad idea. And I really quickly want to get to a couple other points also made by one of them being Brian Berkletic, right? And also just pointing out, like, uh, we're taught to, as Americans, really just be very reactionary. You said it yourself when we play chess, right? The way like the military in the U.S. Attacks, it's blitzkrieg, right? They
Yeah,
use blitzkrieg tactics, so
that's my
they
tactic when
don't.
I play chess.
It is your
And
tactic
you're
when we
more
play
the
chess.
Russian player. You let me come on in like Napoleon and freeze my ass off. And now I'm like, damn, she just got my queen and my rook. How did she do that? I shouldn't have been so blitzkriegi and trying to just attack. So go ahead.
Well, so in that sense, right? The Russians are entirely different, almost to a fault, in those terms. And this is again something that's always talked about. And the last thing I wanted to mention was to remind everybody that Ukraine is largely without power still, right? Their infrastructure is falling apart. They don't have I mean, if you look at Ukraine right now, they have blackouts. They're completely not in a constant state of well-being. People are missing water. So even though this seems like from a PR perspective, political perspective, like a negative thing, Russia is going to be preserving manpower. They're going to be preserving supplies and weapons while while continuing to attack Ukraine, right? So, and I do agree. I do think that this was a way for Ukraine. This was I think Ukraine's chance to, if Russia stayed, to actually inflict damage not only on their weapons but on their people, on their soldiers, right? And I think we would have seen more of a death toll on Russia's end had they stayed. And that's why I really think they did it. And the other person that I think had a really good analysis on this quickly was Brian Berlitic. I
Yeah.
think that's how you say his name. And I put the Telegram link there on
Where?
the doc. It's on the doc.
It's on the doc. All right, let me get off this here because I'm
Yeah.
looking for it and I can't find it. So I'll get to the doc.
Yeah, it should be on the doc, but he basically pretty much just laid it out and said, let me see what he said.
I'll have it
I
up in 2 seconds, fam. I got it right here.
Oh,
I don't even
so
know if our guest has coming in has a Twitter anymore. That's going to be interesting. I got to ask him that right away. So, fam, can you see this right here? Let me pull this
no.
up. Yeah. Here we go.
Okay, yeah, there it is. Okay, so this is what Brian Berlectix from New Atlas said, right? He said, if this actually happens, if it happens, that Russia is going to leave Kherson, right? It means the last possible victory for Ukrainian forces in terms of overwhelming, trapping, destroying, and or capturing huge numbers of Russian troops and equipment is eliminated. 100%. This is just what I said. I agree 100% with him. It will be a major political blow for Russia, a major boost for Ukraine and its Western allies in terms of propaganda. At the same time, Ukrainian infrastructure continues to disappear. Its air defenses are dwindling, exactly, and aren't effective against new Tehran 2 drones anyway. And Russia may still inflict heavy losses on Ukrainian forces approaching Kherson city. Russia will again have preserved its manpower and equipment while Ukraine is forced to stretch out and expose its forces further at a time they are unable to replace both trained manpower and heavy weapons. Any attempt by Ukraine forces to cross the Dnieper River will lead to catastrophic losses. Failure to cross over means ultimately Ukraine's objective of taking back all territory considered Ukrainian by Kiev will remain unfulfilled. Patience will be required to see how this actually unfolds versus how emotionally and politically charged commentary, can you scroll down?
Sorry.
Claims it will unfold. Okay. So 100% agree with his analysis. It's really easy to get emotionally wrapped up in this, especially like I said, when people see Russia as the one that's actually opposing the collective NATO, because it is. But you know, in this case, I think it's best to wait and see rather than react emotionally. And now, if you're ready, fam, we can go ahead and bring in our guest.
Yes, we should.
Yes.
Guys, let me pull this up though real quick because I want to get this going. You know what I'm saying? I was hoping to go to my man's Instagram and see some cat pictures, but there's none up there. So I'm a little bit upset by that. But this guy's a great guy, does some amazing work, really held it down. We saw a lot of him when the operations into Ukraine first started happening because it seemed like a lot of people that were no longer involved with RT kind of stepped out, whatnot. And it was like he was working overtime, but he did an amazing job. And I can't wait to see his work. Don is here with us today. Don Quarter, where are the pictures of the cats on your Instagram, buddy? I mean, come on, dude. Like, there's no cat pictures. And by the way,
right there, playing chess.
Yeah, fam, playing chess right over there. That's the.
There you go.
Did you hear the chess talk about me and Fee the way we play? Because
I did. I did.
I know you had to dig that. We only had a small amount of time in which we played chess, and it was like that. And I could play chess pretty good. I played for a while. I used to play in summer camp when I was younger, and I do have this blitzkrieg attacking style. I was always enamored, and I guess it's in my United States American-born blood. This whole kind of style of like, remember the 3-move checkmates, the 4-move checkmates? I used to love those things and using them against people. So my style of play is always kind of like aggressive, and it's very American. Where Fee, I guess she's kind of resembling, and maybe you can lend credence to this, say it's true or not. She has this more like kind of reel you in kind of method, which we say it's like this Russian style of come on in, and then all of a sudden, before you know, you're trapped, and she's got you. Is that very like a good analogy of what we're seeing play out here in Ukraine and everything else involved?
Personally, I think so. I mean, I have a Telegram channel, and I just today posted on what I think about the current situation with Kherson and everything. I still really believe, like you were saying earlier in the show, that the energy infrastructure in Ukraine is a lot weaker than it was just several months ago because of Russian strikes on that energy infrastructure, and I think it's going to get a lot weaker as winter approaches. Basically, as Russia continues to target that, I think they're basically setting up the Ukrainian military for a massive Russian offensive that's going to happen some point in the winter. Who knows what's going on in Kherson? It could be, a sort of fake retreat that they're hoping the Ukrainians will move in so that they can cut them off, or maybe they're using this as a staging ground for an offensive, using some of those 300,000 mobilized troops that they called up several months ago. I think there's a lot of things that can happen here, and like you said, the people who are on Twitter, on the internet, saying like this is just an embarrassing defeat for Russia. Russia's going to be defeated. I think it's way too early to call anything like that, especially given history, like you said, Craig.
Pam?
Yeah, well, Dawn, before we get into more of that, because I did want to ask your analysis on what's going on now. Let's go back, right, to 8 years before now. You have this documentary, and Pasta, I have the link there. Maybe we could play a little bit of the beginning. Sure. I thought it was really well done. Past the point of Putin, hold on, because the point Putin talks for a little bit, but right after, there was a little bit of an intro. Just while we're getting that set up, Don, what sparked you to make this documentary, and really when did you start going to the Donbass? Because you've been here in Moscow for a while, so.
Sure. Actually, I've been a Marxist-Leninist for a long time, actually. I kind of got radicalized when I was a teenager, and I organized a small kind of organization in university. And in my second year of university, I'm pretty sure it was my second year, it was the events of Euromaidan in Ukraine began to take place. And I was looking at it already kind of exposed to alternative media and stuff. So I knew obviously the mainstream media wasn't giving the whole picture. And I was just very surprised to just see how this was all playing out. Like the United States government supporting actual like neo-Nazis in the 21st century, people from the United States like Russell Texas Bentley and other people from like Italy and Spain who were anti-fascists going to Donbass to join up with the militias there to fight the Ukrainian military. When I saw this all going down, I was like, whoa, this is really, a crazy world event. And I just became fascinated with it. And I had some friends who made some connections with the new government of the Lugansk People's Republic at the time. It was new, obviously. And they started organizing in this republic international anti-fascist conferences. So I was invited to that. The first time I went was in 2016. And the point of this conference was basically to invite foreigners from the West to come and see with their very own eyes what was actually going on in Donbass, to talk to people who unfortunately were, had bad experiences with the neo-Nazis that were invading their land. I mean, they were torturing people. They were just arbitrarily killing people. This is even documented by Amnesty International and the United Nations and other human rights organizations that are typically considered to be pretty pro-Western.
Yeah.
I mean, the narrative that there are no Nazis in Ukraine only really began after the special military operation began, because they needed to counter what Russia was saying about the situation. You could find plenty of stuff about Ukrainian Nazis before that. Anyway, after I had been to this anti-fascist conference and I returned the year after, and the year after that, I just really started to understand like this conflict is at least black and white in the fact that these people are, just being unjustifiably tortured by the Ukrainian military, and the Ukrainian military knows it, and their politicians are, were put in power by NATO and the United States. So I started making this documentary with Jeff Monson actually before the special military operation began in 2021. We wanted to show the world that, everything that's going on in Donbass and Ukraine is still happening, because it was kind of a frozen conflict at that time. There wasn't that much being said about it in the Western media, or in the Russian media even that much at that point. And then the special military operation began after we had filmed these interviews throughout July of 2021 and November of 2021 with all these people who were negatively affected by, the Ukrainian military's indiscriminate bombing of the area. And then we realized after the military operation began that we needed to change the documentary, because it just too many things had happened for us to leave it the way it was. But then there was kind of a light bulb that flickered in our heads. This is the perfect opportunity to make a documentary showing people in the West why the military operation was launched in the first place. Because, I mean, of course, everyone remembers that when it was launched in the Western mainstream media, they just said that Russia attacked the peace-loving country of Ukraine that didn't provoke anybody, that was just, sitting around twiddling their thumbs, and all of a sudden Russian troops came to their border, when obviously it was not like that. Actually, this war, and the reason we call it 8 years before, is because the war started 8 years before Russia actually launched the military operation. It started in 2014, when Ukraine launched its anti-terror operation into Donbass, which basically just meant killing thousands of people, many of them being civilians, and then indiscriminately bombing them, torturing them over the next 8 years until Russia finally said enough is enough. So that's why we made this documentary. It's got a lot of interviews with actual people who lived next to the line of confrontation before the military operation began. They tell terrible stories of torture and how their lives were basically ruined because of the Ukrainian offensive. There was even one guy who showed us where his family lived for about 2 months in 2015, when the artillery bombardments were the heaviest. They lived in an abandoned Soviet bunker. And he said that they were lucky to have that bunker, because most people had to hide in their basements because they were just being constantly bombed. So these are the kind of stories that you can find in this documentary, as well as a bit of an explanation of just how present Nazis are or neo-Nazis rather, in Ukraine, and also an explanation kind of the Russian position, as well as how the West benefits from all this, because obviously
Yeah.
the energy crisis and the massive amounts of weapons that the West sent to Ukraine have been super profitable for America's elites.
Yeah. You know, Don, I want to take the long way home and mention a few things because I want to provide some clarity and some context to what's going on. Yesterday, Fiorella was talking about when you're going to come on the show couple days ago, excuse me. She said, Don Quarter was talking about, Donbass before anybody else was. And I think it's important that you're making this movie. And I also want to send a shout out to one of your colleagues. We haven't really talked about him in a little while, but now that he's back, Caleb Maupin was doing protests in the streets of New York about Donbass when nobody was talking about this stuff. So I think it's just amazing the work you guys are doing too as well. And even pointing out the fact that like groups like Amnesty International even pointing out the human rights abuses here. It reminds me a lot when me and Fiorella were down in Honduras, and even the OAS was in 2017, which is normally traditionally pro-West, going, hey, man, we need to have another election here. This election was even so screwed up. And you see those same parallels. And to also just big ups to getting people from the West over there. I think it's so important that we get them over there to see with their very own eyes. In the future, I've talked about it with Fiorella, the most effective way for people to see what's going on in the global South and Latin America is to bring them there. So I have some of my America First MAGA friends, and I'm saying, hey, man, you got to come down to Nicaragua and see for your own eyes, because there is this kind of confusion about Marxism. And you started off your this segment talking about how you were a Marxist and whatnot. And, it gets so frustrating over here in the States because everything that all the people on the right are pissed off about is either China, Marxist, or globalist. And on the left, you get the same thing because they blame everything on capitalism. You know what I'm saying? Can you give us a little insight too as well before we take a look at your video? Because I think it's important to provide some context. Because when we've gone down to Latin America, the Marxism we see down there is all economics. It's all about class, as opposed to what's going on in America, where they have this kind of like campus Marxism, this cultural Marxism that doesn't even come from Marx, which is what the face of Marxism here. So then you see all these conservatives go, hey, I don't want to deal with Marxism here. I don't want to deal with Marxists, which in turn allows them to manufacture consent for intervention and regime change in Latin America. I want to make sure we kind of square that circle of the Marxism you experience and what it really means so that we can understand where you're coming from. So people who might not watch this show on Rumble will not just whisk it away and say he's just another Marxist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, this is definitely a topic that I'd love to talk about, because there really, I mean, at least in my experience in Russia and in Donbass, there really are kind of two tendencies of Marxism, Leninism in the world, I think, right now, especially here. I mean, there's for example, the Communist Party of the Russian Federation and the communists in Lugansk and Donetsk, Zaporozhye, Kherson, that have aligned themselves with these governments that have taken a stance against the Kiev government. There's that faction of Marxist-Leninists, and then there's another faction of Marxist-Leninists that are Marxists in general, basically, socialists, communists, anyone who says they're on the left, that would be quite familiar to people in the West, I think. And most of the time, these kinds of organizations are generally used as tools of U.S. imperialism to overthrow, governments that are trying to assert their own sovereignty. I mean, to me, I've also read quite a bit about Iran, for example. In Iran, there's a lot of communist organizations that have historically been used to overthrow the government there that has been anti-United States. I mean, even some representatives from one Iranian communist organization that I remember actually met with John Bolton. So there is a difference between these two tendencies, and that much is really seen here, especially because really, in the West, they call Putin a fascist, say that, this is Putin's war in Ukraine, saying that all the special military operation was all Putin's idea. It was actually the Communist Party of the Russian Federation that first started talking in parliament about the need to get involved in Donbass, to recognize the independence of the Lugansk People's Republic and the Donetsk People's Republic, and to render them actual aid. And obviously, the only way to do that was some sort of military solution as well, because I mean, the Ukrainians were already bombing them. There was nothing that was going to counteract that except for guns coming from the other side of the barricades. It was the Communist Party that was calling for that first. Putin was actually seen as moderate because he was like, oh, well, let's wait. Let's see if the Minsk agreements will be adhered to by the Zelensky administration. In Lugansk and Donetsk, the communists there were the first to the front lines alongside the pro-Russian people who were not necessarily communists, but they formed a national front, a popular front of these two republics to fight these Ukrainian fascists, And of course, there were this other tendency of socialists. I mean, I'm not sure about in Donetsk and Lugansk. I don't know anyone from this tendency over there, but in Russia, there's been a tendency of socialists that have come out against the special military operation. They're the ones foremost concerned, not with economics, but with dogmatic interpretations of what Lenin and Marx wrote about, and primarily identity politics. I mean, there were even several pretty high-profile Marxist YouTubers in Russia that said a lot of good things and were spreading a lot of, good Marxist material until all this happened. And all of a sudden, one of them his name is Vesnik Buri. He's got like over 200,000 subscribers on YouTube. He fled to France. And a lot of people are saying that he was helped by the French government. Now he's making anti-special military operation propaganda. So because he considers it an imperialist war. But I mean, anyone who looks at this from an economic perspective, like you said, a Marxist-Leninist sees economics as the core of basically all decisions that are made, all motives in society. If you look at it from that perspective, a class perspective, you see that this war is about basically repulsing the Kiev regime that is backed and was established with the help by NATO and domestic fascists, people who wear swastikas. They say, I mean, even the slogan, "Glory to Ukraine," that is a Nazi slogan. It was banned in the Soviet Union, and it's become normalized now.
Yeah.
Sorry?
The one that Nancy Pelosi repeated, Slava Ukraine. Literally,
yeah, exactly. That's a Nazi slogan. You can see pictures from Nazi-occupied Ukraine where that's on the banner, and it says Heil Hitler right under it. So it's crazy how that's been normalized, and you have tons of the hordes of activists that just get upset by whatever headlines they see and don't understand that much about the subject. Many of them consider themselves socialists. They're all saying this Nazi slogan and saying that Russia is a fascist country and that Putin is Hitler. And that's the great contradiction of our time, I think. I think the way most people understand the political spectrum, especially after this, really needs to be reconsidered.
Yeah. No, yeah, Don, and because you did touch on something. They focus on dogmatic, identity politics situations. Would you say that some of the people that are like that are easily susceptible to figures like Navalny? Because it's been my experience where I've encountered, some of those that call themselves, well, I believe in socialism, blah, blah, blah. But then they'll like, oh, Navalny's good. NATO is, sort of necessary. Oh, the West is not all that bad. But, we want, and it's not to diminish the rights of all people, like LGBTQ issues, right? But in those, but it's almost like in those circles, that's where that is pushed. And I think I find myself seeing that in Latin America, for example, as Pasta mentioned, the people that consider themselves socialists and Marxists are conservative socially. And a lot of the, I think, old school communists here from the Communist Party of Russia tend to be in that way too. From what I've seen, what would you say is your experiences on that, on the social issues in terms of the Marxists that are the old school types?
They are 100% socially conservative. I think the biggest example that we can look at was recently that there was a bill pushed through the government Duma, which is like the Russian Congress, just recently to ban or criminalize rather the spreading of so-called LGBT propaganda. This was not a bill that was proposed by Putin's United Russia Party. It was proposed by the Communist Party of the Russian Federation. Can you imagine in the West a Communist Party trying to pass a bill like that? But see, already,
I didn't know that.
Neither did I. I mean, I want to show people that shit. Look what the
Wait a
communists
minute, Don. You're saying the communists push that, not Putin?
Yes.
No, the Communist Party is pushing that.
Don, you got to send us links. I can't wait to hit up my my Mac friends.
I will.
American first friends.
I mean, of course, these Western communist parties that actually saw this have rejected the KPRF, saying they're like chauvinists or whatever. But the thing is, I mean, if you look at this bill and you hear what the politicians that are talking about it in the Congress are saying about it, like the reason why they feel the necessity to criminalize what they consider to be LGBT propaganda is because all of this culture and all of this, propaganda basically about LGBT issues comes from the West that exists in Russia pretty much. And the people who support this agenda are also calling for, the overthrow of the Putin government. They reject the Soviet past of the country. They're intertwined with the agenda of Western imperialism here. And that's why Russia's not the only country to be like that. I mean, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea is also not friendly to, the LGBT agenda. But whatever you think about that, I mean, whether that's right or wrong, I mean, that's just the reality. This is used as a weapon of Western propaganda. And going to Navalny, what you were talking about, this is a really good thing to bring up, because Navalny is literally a project of the West. I did a lot of research on him. He actually went to courses in Yale. I think it was the Yale World Leadership Program. Basically, it's the program that Yale has to fund or to train people on how to organize color revolutions. Navalny went to this program and studied alongside people that went to go on to organize color revolutions in the Middle East, in Tunisia, in Egypt. You guys remember that. He was literally trained in those classes that are funded by the US government, of course. And his entire organization, since he got back, because before he did these classes, actually, he was renowned as a rabid nationalist, an ultranationalist. He made a political advertisement comparing people from the Caucasus to cockroaches. Oh. And he was very, very anti-immigration.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden he goes to this training course on how to overthrow a government, and his rhetoric changes. He's like, he wants to organize everyone who could possibly dislike Putin in a united front to just overthrow the Russian government. That was his goal. Yeah. And he very effectively clung on to these issues that were not really issues in Russia until they were brought in from abroad, like the LGBT issue, as we're on that as well. But the biggest thing, really, and I think this is probably one of the maybe the straw that broke the camel's back with Navalny. Well, it was in the run-up to it. These protests that were organized against the COVID lockdowns, and because they were enormous. I think it was in 2020 and 2021, early 2021, they were enormous protests. And it was interesting because huge amounts of people, journalists were doing interviews with the people who participated in them. They didn't even know what these protests were for. They just said that they saw some advertisement on TikTok to go out into the street and protest, and they just answered the call because they thought it'd be fun. Yeah. And this is how these color revolutions a lot of times are organized. This is exactly what Navalny was trained to organize: large, huge gatherings of anarchic anger that can be used for very specific political goals. Yeah. And I think also we can look at those protests that were against the COVID lockdowns that were absolutely enormous to also understand how little opposition there is in Russia to the special military operation. Because back then, during the COVID lockdowns, like thousands of people were detained for protesting around the country, and in Moscow as well. And in total, throughout basically all of the protests against the special military operation, we're talking hundreds of people. So you can really use that as a good gauge of comparison, you know.
That's not what the West was reporting. Thousands of people in Moscow against Putin. Putin, Thanos, the evil man, protesting against his military actions. That's different. Listen, I want to point out something really quick before you get to my next question. And fam, then we'll play a little bit of the film. But I do want to stick on this topic because I think we're having such an intriguing conversation here. When it comes to the whole conservative situation, when it comes to the LGBT thing, I didn't want to sound like we were cheering it on. I still think that, you know, there's a stigma when it comes to gay people, that a lot of people in the conservative movement in the United States are a little bit misled, but I don't think it's as big as people make it out to be. I think conservatives in America are more against pushing it on children, and same thing with the trans issue, and that's where they have a problem. So I don't want to misrepresent. I just think it was amazing that people also, the conservatives in America, don't understand the class communism and the class socialism. But I'm going to push a little bit back on you here right now, Don, just to be fair. I don't know if you know this. I'm 61% Southern Italian, right? I'm also a civil liberties guy. But going back to old definitions, trying to be funny, going back to an old definition of what fascism is, right? Mussolini talked about it. He said it's the merger of corporations and state, which is obviously corporatism. Is it fair to really call the Azov battalion and all these guys fascists when they're really more of Nazis? I really don't think they give a shit about the merger of corporation of states. They're straight called Nazis. Isn't it fair to say that we should call them Nazis and not fascists? Because in America, fascism to the social justice warriors is all about racism and people killing, you know, white supremacy. It's not about the merger of what fascism really is. And that's what the United States is, the merger of corporations and state. Go ahead, bud.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to be really specific, I think it would be better and more accurate to call them neo-Nazis than, you know, fascists. Because, I mean, the way I understand Nazism is basically fascism connected with the sort of racial supremacist ideology. And that's what they definitely have, especially because all of these nationalist organizations also, they didn't, I mean, their predecessors in World War II, they didn't work with the Italians. They were collaborating with the German Nazis, who said that, you know, we want to exterminate the Slavs. And I mean, Stepan Bandera, who was the leader of the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists, one of the main collaborationist militant groups that collaborated with the Nazis. I mean, he organized and led those troops from a concentration camp. Actually, when the Nazis came in, they welcomed them with open arms. But then Stepan Bandera was like, "Okay, we're going to declare an independent Ukraine," and the Nazis were like, "No, we don't like that. This is our country now." So they put them in a prison camp and said, "If you know, we kind of like you. So if you want to continue running your anti-Soviet insurgency, you can do that from the prison camp." So they're like you said, neo-Nazis, because all of these nationalists that we see in Ukraine right now, they see their predecessors as these people who literally collaborated with the German Nazis. And a lot of them are descendants from the Ukrainian diaspora, which left after World War II because they were afraid of being repressed in the Soviet Union, because they collaborated with the Nazis. They had Nazi ideas.
Yeah.
Would you say that there's still criticism of Putin in terms of, because seeing all of these Nazi elements and all of these things going on, not going in sooner? Because we've talked about this a lot. Like it's almost 9 years, right? 9 years that happened where the people in the Donbass were enduring just ridiculously horrible conditions, having to hide out, every day being shelled. And a lot of people felt that he went in too late.
Yeah.
Why do you think that he didn't go in earlier? What is your opinion on that? And why he didn't go in earlier? Is it because Russia wasn't ready? There wasn't enough support, because of fear of backlash from the West, because they naively thought there was going to be a respect of the accords. Why do you think it took so long, essentially, for
And can I
Russia?
piggyback on that too, fam? I just want to say too as well, Don, can you also point out, was it mostly to his decision? Because I watch a lot of RT, and I understand from what I've learned from RT is that Putin just doesn't make decisions on its own. Like, he's not the emperor that the West makes him out to be, that there's a process involved as well. Sorry about that, fam.
Well, no, that's totally true. I mean, I could definitely talk about that too. I mean, starting with Fiorella's question, it's a really good one. I think there's a combination of things that contributed to the fact that Russia didn't deal with this immediately. Number one, I would just say Vladimir Putin's background as a politician, and specifically coming from the security apparatus in Russia. You know, he was in the Soviet Union a KGB operative, and he basically came to power in politics out of that institution. In Russian, they call them Chekisty. This is just so he's a Chekist, and they're renowned for being very conservative. I mean, their job as the security apparatus throughout the Soviet Union was to keep everything as stable as possible. So part of it, I think, is just that mentality of the Chekist, which is to not rock the boat if the boat doesn't need to be rocked, basically. That's the first thing. Second of all, I think the economy, the Russian economy, was not prepared for something like that back then. Back in 2014, I mean, the Russian economy was far more in a state of dependency on Western finance capital than it is now. I mean, the dollar, the percentage of dollars in the total Russian reserves was very much higher. And we could see that by how badly affected the Russian economy was after the US and Europe put sanctions on Russia following what happened in 2014 and 2015. I mean, the ruble crashed, and there was an economic crisis in Russia because of those sanctions. And now we can see the difference of what Russia has done between 2014, 2015, and now, the kind of strides they've made to get out of dependence from Western finance capital. The fact that they paid off pretty much all of their foreign debt. The government had been running a budget surplus for a very long time. Dollars had been leaving the country, and gold had been coming in. And then you get the point where this special military operation was launched. The West launched as many sanctions as it possibly could at an unprecedented scale, and the Russian economy is fine. I mean, the economic situation here is like relatively unaffected in comparison to what's happened in the West. Those sanctions completely backfired. I would say the economic situation is better than the military situation for Russia right now. I'm not saying Russia's losing, but it's definitely been harder than they expected from the beginning. So I think the fact that the economy in Russia was not ready for a special military operation back then. The second thing, just Putin basically being, and his administration also, not just Putin, because obviously, like we said, he doesn't make all the decisions. They're conservative in the way they deal with the West, because I mean, they also do understand that Western imperialism has a lot more resources than just Russia by itself. And also, I think because of those first 2 points, Russia was really hoping that the Minsk agreements would work, which for anyone who's watching doesn't know what those are. Minsk agreements were supposed to secure peace in Donbass before the military operation began. It was brokered with participation of Ukraine and the leaders of the People's Republics, as well as some European countries and Russia. So that was supposed to maintain peace, but Kiev kept violating it over and over, because these neo-Nazis were the most adamant, and still are, the most adamant soldiers in Ukraine's army. They were at the front lines, and they were the ones getting a kick out of torturing people. And they were really, like, even out of the Ukrainian government's control, I would say. There's even a video that went pretty viral of Zelensky going to the front line, meeting with leaders of the Azov battalion, trying to basically like give them a lecture, because the Azov battalion was continually told to abide by the Minsk protocols, and they were just ignoring them. and they just were continuing to bomb Donbass, even though they kept being told that they were supposed to stop.
Are you talking about the Zelensky video when he went and tried to tell them to back down, and they're like, "Dude, you're not in charge," pretty much.
Yeah,
like, get out of here.
You could just see how like little power he has over those people from that video, and that was basically a good representation of what was going on throughout those 8 years. Just nobody was listening to the Ukrainian government. And on the subject of whether Putin makes all these decisions or not, I think obviously he doesn't. I think it's kind of the same historical misunderstanding that a lot of people make with Stalin, for example. People say that Stalin was just, in the Kremlin barking orders at everyone, and everyone just did whatever he said without question. I mean, there was a party apparatus and a system, and decisions were made through like a bureaucracy. And it's the same thing here. I mean, like Putin didn't unilaterally declare that there was going to be a special military operation. And we don't know what happened behind closed doors. But to be honest, I think Russia was pushed into this outcome. I don't think they were like, yeah, we're definitely going to do this months in advance. I think there was a contingency plan. I think they decided, these Minsk agreements are going on for too long, being violated. We got to come up with a plan B just in case things get really crazy. But I don't think they wanted to launch the special military operation. And we can see that by, the months of meetings that Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov had with Western leaders, pleading for security guarantees, saying, can we just make sure that Ukraine does not become part of NATO? Can you please promise not to expand NATO past what you promised you wouldn't expand it past, because we feel threatened by this military organization. And the West kept saying, oh, well, you have nothing to worry about because it's a defensive military pact. Russia kept trying to show the West that it had been violating agreement after agreement not to form military alliances that threatened the security of other countries in Europe. And the West just did not want to negotiate. We saw this from, December of 2021 up until actually even earlier. I remember the media hysteria began really in like September or October, up until this all happened in February. And that was combined with the fact that the Ukrainians actually launched an offensive before Russia's special military operation began. And this is something that was obviously never reported in the Western media. Yeah. But you can watch it actually in the documentary. I interview a Lugansk politician who explains that the amount of Ukrainian bombardment against the People's Republics increased 100 times by within a week or a week or two of the beginning of the special military operation. That was another thing that pushed Russia to basically press that button and launch the special military operation. They were bombarding the place. They were preparing for another offensive. And that's also why, as you mentioned at the beginning of our talk, I was over there at the beginning of the special military operation. I was in Rostov because I was covering the evacuation of people from Lugansk and Donetsk. That was because Ukraine was making that entire region a living hellscape for the people there. They were already ready to launch another offensive and try to retake the Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics.
If you want an example of how bad things were, just look 2015 at the Lugansk airport. It looks like something out of a friggin' video game. And it was a beautiful airport that people used to fly in and out of it all the time. And like you said, we had this up for a while too as well. How many violations the week before the military actions by Russia took place by Ukraine, just going and shelling and amping it up? It was like, and me and Fiorella talked about this before you came on. This was kind of like the situation where they weren't sitting around in a room and say, all right, now let's collectively get together and take around the West with all our partners in this region. It was like they were backed into the corner, like a dog in a corner, and they had no choice. Let's take a little look at a little bit of your film, 8 years before Donbass, the documentary by Don Quarter, guys. He's on, I just found him on Twitter. I'm following you, Donald Quarter. You have to put in Donald, not Don, to get his Twitter. I don't know how active he is over there, but that is his Twitter. Guys, let's take a look at this video. I'm going to mute us up, guys. We have over almost 400 people on the YouTubes. We have about 60, I believe, on the Rockfin. Let's get those numbers up. Rumble, we're rumbling it right now. 25, 26 people. Guys, share all the links. You know all the ways you can help us out. Help independent media thrive. You know what to do. Here's Don Quarter. We'll come right back after we take a little peek from his documentary. Go check it out. It's on YouTube. Here it is.
Тому що у нас робота буде, у них немає. У нас пенсії будуть, у них немає. У нас піклування під дітей, під людей, під пенсіонерів, під дітей буде, у них немає. У нас діти підуть до школи, до дитячих садків, у них вони будуть сидіти в підвалах. Бо вони нічого не вміють робити. І так, і саме так ми виграємо цю війну.
Eight long years. "29 fruitless ceasefires, thousands of innocent people killed, countless broken promises and war crimes. How did it come to this? How did it happen that the same people who one day sang the same national anthem, went to the same schools, served to protect the same borders, found themselves embroiled in a ferocious civil war the next?" In 2014, the leaders of a violent coup d'etat called Euromaidan came to power in Ukraine. From abroad, the new government had the support of NATO, the European Union, and the most aggressive American militarists.
Free world is with you. America is with you. I am with you.
If it does start to gain altitude, the Russians will be working behind the scenes to try to torpedo it. No, exactly.
From within the country, the coup was propped up by extremist militias, armed.
I don't want to start watching that because I'm not going to be able to stop. That is some amazing work. But listen, I want to play one part really quick just over, and that's the very first 20 seconds, because I think the majority of our audience would know. Fiorella, when we started this channel back in 2015, I believe it was, right? When did
2017.
2017. But we talked about what had happened in 2014 and what in 2015. I even made a joke so people would remember his name. I called him Pork Chop Poroshenko, so people would understand who Poroshenko is. That is who it is. This was they had an interim president, I believe, what was his name, when they removed Yanukovych. When Yanukovych left, Yanukovych also said to Putin and the Russian Federation, look, you're going to have to get involved and get involved quick. These people in the Donbass, they're going to be left for dead. Like, he said that early. And that's why a lot of people say, why did the Russian Federation and Putin wait so long and show so much restraint? But I want to show this one clip really again. This is Pork Chop Poroshenko, who became the president. And then I want to point something out really quick. So watch what Poroshenko says here, ladies and gentlemen. One last time, really quickly, This is the beginning of Don Quarter's documentary, 8 years before the Donbass. Check this out, what he says one more time, and I want to show something.
I think it's before this part.
Is it? My bad.
Yeah,
Тому
there
що
you
у
go.
нас робота буде, у них немає. У нас пенсії будуть, у них немає. У нас піклування під людей, під пенсіонерів, під дітей буде, у них немає. У нас діти підуть до школи, до дитячих садків, у них вони будуть сидіти в підвалах, бо вони нічого не вміють робити. І так, і саме так ми виграємо цю війну.
So he's
Crazy, huh?
pretty much saying, right? He's pretty much saying our children will be able to go to school. Our children will be able to have lives. They're going to surrender and brought to their knees because their children will be waiting in basements, eating pickled vegetables as the sirens are sounding and the bombs are dropping. And don't worry, we got Western weapons. We got as much as we want. And we'll give them to the craziest, sickest bastards within our society, the Azov battalion, because that's what the West always does. They fund the craziest people out there from the Mujahideen to ISIS to Azov. And that's how we'll win this war. We'll bring them to their knees. I want to show people something really, really quick on who Poroshenko is. And please, Don, your opinions on this too as well, because people go, well, who is Poroshenko? Well, Poroshenko is a buddy of Joe Biden's. How do I know? Because here's a White House briefing in 2014. The Vice President Biden will travel to Ukraine. The Vice President has departed for Kiev, Ukraine, for the inauguration of President-elect Porkchop Petro Poroshenko. That's who this guy is. That's how the West is connected. That's who these people are. Poroshenko was a little puppet of the West. Biden went over there to make sure that everything was secured from Burisma to Nancy Pelosi's son, Paul Pelosi. So all these guys like Adam Schiff could suck off the blood of Ukrainians while the Ukrainian people suffered. I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, I mean, it goes into connection with the fact that Hunter Biden, his son, also has business ties to Ukraine, where he's making tons of money. I mean, that's essentially why the Democratic Party has become the party of war. Essentially, we're in this weird time where, obviously the two-party system, both parties are pretty terrible, but we're in this weird time where just not even half a century after the Iraq War, already the Democratic Party is the party of war. They're the ones supporting this war because the leadership has economic ties to, the business people over there. And so you get Democrats supporting neo-Nazis,
Yeah. But in all fairness too, really quickly, Fee, and I'll let you get the question. It wouldn't be made possible if the previous party of war, which is the old establishment Republicans from the George Bush age, McCain and Lindsey Graham went over there and whipping the whip to say, we got your back first, the Ruskies. So it's the uniparty here too as well. Yeah, the Democrats came in and they did their corporatization. It sucked off the blood of Ukrainians while they extracted all the wealth out of there. But it was set up by the McCains and the Lindsey Grahams, which also combined with the Murphys from Connecticut, the senator, another Democrat to get this thing going. So I think equal spread across the board from our Western government over here. So
yeah, Victoria Nuland also, she's a liberal.
Oh yeah, Jeffrey Pyatt, Jake Sullivan. These are the same people that came right back into power after all the shit they did. I'm sorry, fam. Did you have a question or did you have anything else before we get Don out of here?
Yeah, just one last thing, Don. What do you think is going to where do we go from here, right? Your documentary is 8 years before, and now we're here in this conflict. We talked in the beginning about Kherson and what we thought of that. But there's a criticism of Russians, and this is something I've heard from several people, and I mean, you've been here a while, that Russians are being a little bit, the Russian army, the Russian military, Putin, they're being too restrained. They have way too much restraint. They're not really attacking where they should. They need to stop being so trusting of the West. we kind of mentioned this, I think, at work, the grain deal, right? The grain deal,
Yeah.
what is that about? Just going back into it. What is your opinion on that? Is Russia being a little bit too trusting of the West? Are they not being, I would say, are on the offensive as much, aggressive enough? Or do you think like there's a reason for that?
Well, I think there is, of course, a reason in the minds of Vladimir Putin and the administration that is carrying out these policies right now. But personally, I mean, if you ask me personally, I think that the special military operation would have been a lot more effective, and in the long run, a lot less people would have been killed as a result of this conflict if a lot more force were put into the original campaigns, the original offensive the original offensives that came from the north and from the east. I think right from the bat, Russia didn't put as much force into it, as many troops and as many military vehicles and weapons as it could have. I think that was actually a conscious decision based on the kind of rhetoric we were hearing from Vladimir Putin at the beginning and from Shoigu. It was all about making sure that as few civilian casualties took place as possible. And I think that's great. That's a great way to wage war. That's not how the United States wages war. I mean, with shock and awe, the United States government killed thousands of people, upwards of 1 million people in Iraq, and their strategy was just to basically reduce to rubble everything in their path. Russia, I think, was trying to avoid that. But the problem here is that because they weren't able to achieve their initial goals with this strategy of hoping to avoid civilian casualties, my fear is that in the long run, more civilians are going to die as a result of this conflict. I think, obviously hindsight is 2020, but it would have been probably, and maybe this is also just my American speaking, maybe it would have been a good idea to just go in there with full force and make sure that there would have been no opportunity for the West to send weapons, for the Ukrainian government to react, for anyone to organize some sort of significant insurgency. That's the way I see it.
That's funny because that's what we talked about before, that a lot of people are like, dude, Vladdy, let's go. Let's drop the hammer and wipe these Nazis out. Enough is enough. And I mean, like I said, I don't mean to sound so campy about it, but a lot of people feel that way. And now the way this is going to be spun, and I think this is going to bring out the conspiracy critters that are going to say the reason why this played out the way it did play out is because that Russia and Vladimir Putin is part of the WEF and the Great Reset. Right. You've heard this before. There's been talks about vaccines in Russia. What are your thoughts about the story? I don't want to say the story, the possibility that this could be all theater being played out right in front of us. And this is about the World Economic Forum, the Great Reset. Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin have spoke out the World Economic Forum. They've rubbed elbows with Klaus Schwab. What are your thoughts on that when people kind of bring that principle up? And that's my last question of the day, Don.
Yeah.
Well, I think it would be a really a long shot to say that, Vladimir Putin, Xi Jinping, and Western leaders, for example, you mentioned vaccines. Maybe we could use that as the as the focal point here. I mean, all countries around the world. I mean, basically, there was Cuba developed a vaccine, China developed a vaccine, Russia developed a vaccine. All these countries also had lockdowns, just like the West. I mean, but you would have to have basically Kim Il-sung and Vladimir Putin and Joe Biden, like all in some sort of big conspiracy to control the world, which I just don't see as really feasible at all, especially with the vaccines. I mean, the vaccines in Russia and in the West are completely different. I mean, I'm not a vaccine expert, but yeah, I know that the Russian vaccine was made in a traditional way. From it was considered a traditional type of vaccine, whereas the Western vaccines were used from artificial materials that were largely experimental, and nobody knows what what the consequences of that are going to be 30 years down the line. So that's why, I mean, if you look at the science, you can't just say that just vaccines are bad for people.
Yeah.
They've come in different shapes and sizes. And I personally got the Russian vaccine. I feel, safe saying that I did, and I feel fine, and I am confident that I'll be fine in 30 years. But if I was living in the West, I'd probably not want to get those vaccines. I'd probably want to go to Russia and get the vaccine and come back.
No mRNA in your shit, right? No mRNA.
Yeah, it's
mRNA.
mRNA.
There is an N, but there's no mRNA. But that's Don Quarter, everybody. Go check it out. He does have a Twitter. I couldn't find it because it is a Donald Quarter. You can always check him out over there. The links to the YouTube are right over there as well.
Yeah. I put it in the chat, but we'll add it to the description.
Yes.
And Dawn, thank you. We went way over time, but thank you so much. We had a great conversation. So we'll have to do it again sometime for sure.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show. It was my pleasure.
Don, you got to hear the right rumor. The rumor is that Putin, Xi Jinping, and Donald Trump are all working together to defeat the globalists. That's what's out
that's
there.
The other
right?
one. Okay.
That's the other
That
one.
would be nice, but
Yeah.
I doubt that's the case.
They're fighting the globalists together. So, yeah. I know. Laugh because it's funny, brother. We love you, Don. We'll see you again.
All right,
soon.
love you too.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, Dawn.
Fam, can you take him on in chess? Do you think you can beat him in chess?
I don't know. Maybe.
Well,
sometime
Don, I know you're listening
we won't-
backstage before you get out of there. If he wants to play you in chess, and then what you want to warm
maybe
up on me?
maybe when
because-
RT isn't putting us to work, we'll be able to at some point play chess.
Yes, I hope
Okay.
so. You guys work like crazy, but you do an amazing job. Go check out his film. We put it in the chat.
Yes, I put it in the
Holy shit,
chat. I
fam!
can
I'm
put it in
watching
the
that
chat
this
again.
weekend. We
Actually.
should maybe watch that, like do a watch along, because
Yeah.
our Rockfin is always like, you guys need to do more premium content just for your followers, and you know what I'm saying. So maybe we can do like a watch along with something like that, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. Here's the YouTube again. I just put it in the chat
it's awesome.
again.
Jill,
Okay.
Julie Love, and Lucky Burrito, we're looking for it. So please, and remember tomorrow, guys, fam. The crosstalk won't be later to that night. We'll release that night, but I'll be shooting that in the morning. And then after my AM wake up, I have Shanda Master Show. We just got a thumbnail on that. You can go check that out if you want to put that in the chat, guys. That's great. Later on that night, Lucky Burrito. So a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, you're doing that's like 3 shows, right?
Well, yeah, but I mean, I'm glad I'm going to be talking about elections on Crosstalk. It's with Dennis Kucinich tomorrow. That's pretty fucking awesome. Again, I love.
That'll be great. It'll be playing on RT tomorrow when I'm I'm not at work tomorrow.
So that
you're filming it tomorrow.
Tomorrow day, but
so it won't be till Friday, maybe.
I don't know.
I don't know. Anyway, it'll. I don't know what day it is or anything compared to where you're at. It's almost midnight here. So let's get to the election stuff.
Do you want to get to the election stuff, or do you want? Yeah, let's get to the election shit because it's time for the election things, fam.
Yeah.
First of all, I got to just point out right away when we talk about our media, because the media, we were talking about how it conditioned everybody to be anti-Russia, Russophobic, and whatnot. They are prepping and preparing you for BS when it comes to elections. This is the Twitter page over here. Understanding this year's election results. Understanding, and you got all your pretty stickers. I got my sticker too. You know, everybody gets their stickers. Understanding this year's election results and what to expect of them. So look at this, fam. This is just, and tell me if we have any cross reference to stuff that we witnessed, to the 5 elections we witnessed last year in Latin America. State election officials, civic organizations, and experts share tips and resources to prepare voters for any potential delays in the 2022 midterm election results. Follow here for important information on distinguishing between partial vote results and official results. Are there any difference between partial and official results in Latin America? No, because as soon as they're done counting, they put the official results right there that are going to be passed on to the next stage and the next stage. But those results there are official. Second, let's get to the next part. This stuff is just crazy. Official election resources in your state. Resources meaning only the AP can call it. Nobody else can call it. Only the ones that YouTube decides that they can call. how states tally and process ballots differently, meaning none of the places are they usually counted where they're cast. Most of the places are taken off to a tabulation room, and that's where they're given to you, except for the small areas which have a small amount of voting. How absentee voting may impact your state processing time, meaning, fam, that in a lot of states, you're allowed to put your ballot in the mail that day on election day. So that means that that state, that county, that city, or wherever you're at, depending on the rules, because it's so different everywhere because it's so confusing, may allow to 5 to 7 days after election day to count your ballots. Some people say, we're just going to keep on getting ballots until we get the results we want. Additional resources, and they have it in Spanish and whatnot, fam.
So basically, you're not allowed to think for yourself. You're not allowed to make your own decisions about what you're seeing right away. And the reason you're not allowed to do that is because if you actually thought for a minute there by looking at what's actually going on, you would realize that the United States has the worst election system in the entire world. And I say the entire world, even though I haven't been to every election in the entire world, just based on having done research and written an article as to how nobody else does what we do. People sometimes do different versions. I think Sweden has somewhat of a vote by mail, but it's completely there's a tracking system. They have other measures in place. Nobody does what we do in terms of vote by mail, no ID, no chain of custody, meaning we don't know where it's taken. We don't have live counting. We don't have public counting of any way. We don't have audits. They'll tell you we don't have audits. We have elections on a Tuesday, while everybody else has them on a weekend or makes it a federal holiday. We have sometimes a month or more to vote, or weeks if not. And you also have ballot harvesting in several states where I could give my ballot to Pasta and he could go collect all of our friends' ballots and take it and dump them wherever there's a ballot drop-off box. Let's see. No biometrics of any kind. Okay. No paper ballot trails in some states. In some states, they say, oh, you'll do it a paper, but you won't get to see a tally or a count. Let's see what else. Long lines. Pasta waited almost an hour.
Yeah, I got through it almost an hour. That's fast.
I would have said this is fucking ridiculous. This is ridiculous. No, I'm sorry. Like, and somebody was like, well, you can't wait an hour to vote. It's democracy. And I was like, listen, I know you're used to this bullshit in the first world United States, but in shithole developing countries, right? The shithole countries, they vote in 5 minutes. So sorry, I don't think you're missing the point here.
I can wait an hour. A mom who has kids that have a babysitter, she's got to pay, and every single dollar is a lot to her. That she can't wait.
You shouldn't have to wait an hour.
Care of their pets at home. The people who have a lunch break, they can't. You know what I'm saying? This is not, and the whole thing about this is what they do. Well, this is what we're going to provide: early voting, right? That's it. The problem is how are they securing the ballots every single day? You have to have a chain of custody. Can never get out of the sight of the public. Your ballot, it should start in front of the public. It should end in front of the public. And that's the truth. Now, here's something else. Oh shit. I want to add this here, fam. Let me add this here. This is Vegas, right? Las Vegas system, Nevada. Mm-hmm. And we talk about this all the time because there's nuance to all these things. Automatic voter registration when you obtain or renew a driver's license, right? Fam, a lot of people say that that's a good thing. Oh, that's awesome that you're automatically registered. And it might be that you're automatically registered if you had to show up in person and vote. Because the problem is they also have mass absentee ballots mailed out to everyone on the voter rolls, meaning everybody on that roll is going to be sent a mail-in ballot. If 60% of the people participate in the mail-in ballots, 60%, 40% are outstanding. And when you have ballot harvesting as number 3, you are now combining 3 laws that have a recipe for election fraud, for election rigging, because you have all these ballots. And right in front of me when I was going in the vote, Somebody brought in 3 ballots, and I asked the lady, I was recording the volume, hey, so ballot harvesting's legal over here? Just think about that, the recipe for disaster in which that is. If you had an automatic registration, but then you had to go show up, so be it. Then that's good, right? Now you're automatically registered. We have to worry about that. But if you have automatic registration, which people say that's awesome, with a mass mail out system and all these laws, most of these laws that are now implemented were implemented during the coronavirus in 2020 election. They carried over to some states in 2021, like Nevada.
Yeah.
And that shit is just, there's also, by the way, fam, no ID required and vote centers.
Yeah.
Vote centers mean when people go, oh, that's great. Damn, you can vote wherever you want. Not when it takes 45 minutes to an hour, and not when now it eliminates any bit of auditing process, because now you can't audit back or track a person's vote back to the center they're at, because it's vote centers. It's designed to eliminate audits, to remove transparency. That's what vote centers do. They sell it as accessibility, but it's really about destroying transparency and trackability.
It's really about creating chaos and creating a system that's not trackable. So therefore, they don't have to commit to any sort of audit. They sell it to you as, oh my God, this will help poor people. It'll help the disabled. It'll help old people. Why wouldn't I just want to mail my ballot? Because Americans, we're lazy. I mean, as Americans, you are. I mean, the fact that you can't get out of your go out to vote. Okay, Fiorella, it's on a Tuesday. Okay, legally, you're supposed to be allowed by your job, right? But of course, let's say you work in the service industry. I mean, let's be real here. Many places don't give a crap if you want to go vote. So that is done by design. So it's not like if you fix one thing, everything will be fixed. It's like the whole system is designed to make it impossible for you to do this in the way it should be done, and impossible for your vote to count. Because if your vote actually counted, we wouldn't have these people that we have in power. We really wouldn't. All these people would be gone. You wouldn't have any of these people. You would have a libertarian party that was strong. You'd have another independent party. You'd have a socialist party. You'd have a green party. You'd have like a multi-party system where people actually had a fair shot. But because this is done by design to sell you like the accessibility point, the attractiveness and allure of sitting at home and mailing your ballot or giving it to your friends so they could turn it in for you, then you lose all of the chain of custody, the things that are important. And then you also lose any sense of actually knowing and understanding your country's system, because I can guarantee you that most people in the United States do not understand a tenth about their election, a fraction about their election at all. It's not the sexiest subject. It's one of these things that can be very technical, but like, if you don't, you should see the people in Nicaragua, the people in Honduras, the people in Colombia. They know everything that goes on in their election. They literally fought tooth and nail for it to be the fairest as it could be. And even in spite of all of the things they did, they're still like, in those countries, it's like the buying of, oh, I'll pay you, $50 and for you to vote for this guy. That happens sometimes. But as far as the process itself, the mechanisms, the machines, all of that, the biggest thing is too, we have a closed source system of black box voting. We don't get to literally be able to look at what we're doing here. And in Brazil, they had an open source system. In spite of it being a direct recording electronic device. It doesn't matter. They had an open source system. We like paper ballots back. We like being able to track every single vote. That's why I think Nicaragua's system is one of the best. But at the same time, it's like, even compared to a country like Brazil, that's very similar in terms of economic structure and political, layout. It's our country just falls the worst.
And I would take Brazil's system 1,000 times over American systems, because it still has all the other things in play, right? It still has, you got to be registered 5 months before the election. Make sure you're updated. I don't know how often you have to update it, but it is a system where they keep those books clean, and they're really proud about that. It's a day of voting. You must show up with ID. You know what I'm saying? It's quick to vote. where the vote is cast, it's counted. The public can witness it. All these things, open source. There's no drop boxes. There's no mail-in. So they have all these securities. Yeah, there's an area of concern, but that's one thing. We have multiple areas of concern, like I just pointed out. Look what we have in Nevada. Look what we have in Nevada. Those are 5 things I told you. Vote centers, no ID required. It's not on a regular day. Mass mailouts to everybody on the voter rolls. Ballot harvesting. It's just like a recipe for friggin' disaster. Now, with that being said, what does that mean about the election itself? For me, there's one position in particular that's really important, and that is the Secretary of State. And there are 2 Secretary of State that are America First MAGA people. One of them being Mark Finchem in Arizona, who's currently down. We'll take a look at that. And Kerry Lake, who's currently down, but it looks like they said they're swinging a certain way. I don't know, because the whole process is shot, even in Arizona. We have some stuff going on in Arizona. But here in this state, there's a guy by the name of Jim Marchant, and he's attacked in the Las Vegas Review Journal more than Trump is, because he's known as a Trumper, as America First person. But in his attack ads, when they're attacking him, and they don't even really talk about the person who, and I'll address that one second. They don't even really talk about the person who's running. They're like, don't vote for Jim Marchant. Jim Marchant is awful. And he wants to eliminate early voting, the 2-week early voting, because they're literally 3 weeks out almost the early voting. He wants to eliminate drop boxes and what else is the third one he wants? And he wants 1 day to vote, or all these things. It's an attack ad, and it's like, oh, those are all the reforms I want in my election. Maybe I should go donate to that guy. I did get to meet him at an event before, and we talked, and he's all about election reform. And he knows at the end of the day, I told him, listen, I don't care what you're wearing. I think it's a lost cause, you trying to run as a Republican, and all you guys with this idea that you're going to take over the Republican Party from the inside. A hell of a lot more organized and put together than the progressives. And hey, listen, they got to learn for themselves. I did the same thing. You go do the same thing. That's fine. But at the end of the day, as a Secretary of State, what do you want to do? And they want to reform the election system. And these guys have been all ears to me, Mark Finchem and Jim Marchant, to say, what did you learn over there? What's going on? They've opened up the door and said, tell us, how do we have fair elections? So therefore, that's the only position I really, truly care about. And that is that position. And I did vote. When I went to vote, I voted Libertarian, fam, across the board, except for this position where I voted for Jim Marchant. And Jim Marchant is the one I'm keeping an eye on. Now, I don't know what percentage of the vote is in, but you can see there's the Dem. They didn't even put his goddamn picture up on the goddamn page. They could have picked any picture. They're so freaking lazy. This is the current Secretary of State's page. But Jim Marchant has 48.48%, and Aguilar has 47.36%. Then you can see you got the Libertarian Party guy down there, Crane Ross. I'm sorry, Crane. Ross Crane, you're the only Libertarian I didn't vote for on the ballot yesterday, because I know Jim Marchant has a really good chance of winning this if, in fact, they can do with it what we said the plan was as Bernie Sanders people, fam. We got to overwhelm the system. We got to overflood it to where the cheating won't even come into factor because there's so many people voting and shit like that. Yeah, I'm wishing on a star.
Yeah, essentially.
I don't know what.
I think wishing on a star is better.
Yeah, right. I don't even know what percentage of the vote that is in there, but that is what's going on, and I'm paying close attention to Jim Marchant's race right now because he is the Secretary of State that wants to reform stuff. Fam,
so
questions? Go ahead. That the people are.
Yeah. Okay, so this guy says the real problem is the 2-party system. Come on, Pasta. It's unconstitutional to have an ID. Only a signature comparison is required. And then he said, I'm sorry. I love vote by mail. I just dropped my ballot off at a drop box.
Yeah, because because the system is broken to where you can go and vote in 5 minutes, and it's done for security purposes. All right, you like it because it's convenience, because they broke the system on purpose, right? They broke if the system wasn't broken on purpose and it was convenient, easy. If you can walk in like they did in Nicaragua, if you can walk in like they did in Colombia, and you get in and out in 5 minutes, and that's a secured vote, and that brings more security to the system, and more people will be confident in the system itself, you'd love to participate in that, especially if it was a national holiday with a day off. All the 5 countries that we witnessed the elections, all the elections took place on a Sunday. Fam, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, and I'm just gonna say that just speaks to how lazy Americans are. You can't like I said in Nicaragua in these in we were just in Brazil. People had to like do whatever they could to go vote. They had to in the favelas. Not everybody has a car there. Hello, it's the favela. So what do? They get their friends. They were offering there was a system that was offering transportation to go voting. Do that like it but of course it was on a Sunday where everybody's able to do this. It's part of the process. It's compulsory. You have to vote, which I agree with and I don't agree with. Right? There's good things and bad things about that. But it's this idea that we just have to sit on our asses as Americans and just make it easy as possible. If there was a system in check to allow vote by mail where you could track the ballot and it was literally collected by one entity and that entity took it to a place where the whole public could come watch the counting and everything could be like that, then yes, that would be maybe a way to do it. But it's not like that at all. And it's the two-party system is a problem precisely because we can't get any other parties because we don't have fair elections. So you go back, you're circling back here. The problem is the system, and the system is set up so your vote doesn't count. So you don't elect people who actually represent you. So you can't vote your way out of this. You can keep voting all you want, but as Pasta said, you're wishing upon a star. And I think wishing upon a star is more effective because there's just all these people, including libertarians, Green Party, none of them are addressing the fact that we don't have fair elections in the United States. Not one of them. And I'm sorry, they're not talking about it enough. They're just complaining about it after the fact. And then 5 minutes later, people forget and they go on talking about, well, 2024, what's going to happen? Oh, well, what's going to happen is whatever they want to happen. Because if you understand the way politics works in the United States, a lot of the times the Democrats like having a Congress that is right wing so they can say, we couldn't do anything because the Republicans prevented us from doing anything. So if there's a Republican shift, that's because it's allowed to happen. And what I'm seeing right now is the next grift is to push Republicans, to push Republican candidates as the antidote to the Democratic candidates, which is a dangerous way to go, not because they're Republicans, but because the next swing is going to be towards Democrats and so on and so forth. And that's all you get. And you continue voting from the comfort of your couch by sitting on your ass and mailing your ballot. It doesn't fucking count. So it's going to require Americans to get out of their ass, to go literally do something that's not voting to actually change anything. And guess what? Most people are like this person here. They don't want to, they don't want to be bothered. They don't want to deal with it. Well, there's your government.
Comfortable, man.
That they know what Americans like. They know about comfort. And every single major country in the entire world requires an ID. Every single country. Developing nations, countries where people can barely have water.
How do you say it's unconstitutional, fam? I don't get how he said that person. How do you say that it's unconstitutional to ask for an ID? And I also want to point out before fam answers this question that in the other countries that we go to, it is the grassroots that ask for more securities when it comes to identification. In fact, in Honduras and in Colombia, it was the Libre Party in Honduras.
The more socialist.
Yeah, they wanted more securities for identifications because they understand if the ruling class can manipulate that part of the election, they can create more fake votes, dead people, fictitious people and stuff. But if you have securities in place where you have to have an ID, where you do get marked on the finger, there is no mail out, whatnot, it's hard to steal an election and create other votes, fam.
Yeah, and it's not unconstitutional. You could require an ID. The reason they're saying it's unconstitutional is because, again, this is where the Democrats' identity politics come in, right? You're excluding Black people from voting. You're excluding poor people from voting. How the hell do the poorest countries in the world manage to get everybody an ID? Can you answer? Because nobody has been able to answer that question whenever I ask it. Why do these third world shithole countries give everyone an ID? I don't, and we can't do that, right? We just go, oh well, no, you're being ableist, you're being racist, you're being this. No, I'm not. I want those votes to count. Right now, those votes aren't counting. The progressive votes aren't counting. None of these votes are counting. That's what I'm saying.
It's
And
affecting the
before
grassroots
we
more than
gotta
they
be careful.
realize, right, fam?
Yeah, I gotta be careful.
Yeah,
what
we
I
got to
just
be
said.
careful. But I'm saying it affects the grassroots more than it affects somebody else. This
Absolutely.
Maricopa County election official disputes fraud and incompetence. Fam, his name is Bill Gates. But you can't make this shit up. But
Is it
Maricopa,
really?
it's Bill Gates. It's freaking Bill Gates. I know it's crazy, but that is his name. And let me just see if I can make it a little bit bigger. Don't make any jokes, fam.
Biden looks like a fucking moron.
Okay, that's Bill Gates. That's Bill Gates.
Do
And
they make
as
them
this
in,
was
like,
happening in real
okay.
time yesterday, they were trying to play this off, and we'll show you what's going on. Maricopa County Board of Supervisors Chairman
It's
Bill
always
Gates.
Maricopa.
I know. Disputed incompetence in the 2022 election process as levied by Arizona Republican gubernatorial. Thank you. Candidate Kerry Lake. My tongue got stuck. He told CNN Wednesday afternoon, I do not believe what happened yesterday can be fairly called incompetence or corruption in any way, Gates said. Did we have some issues? Yes, he continued. Gates referenced voting tabulators running into issues at 20% of the voting locations on Tuesday, something that was resolved by the afternoon. Fam, I'm going to stop it right there really quick because the way they write this shit, it just makes me so mad. First of all, they make it look like 20% is nothing. Oh, it's just 20%.
Mm-hmm.
20%. And it was resolved that afternoon. How long did you have shit going on that this couldn't fucking happen? And what did happen? Let me show you, ladies and gentlemen, because this is what's going on. And I got a question for you, fam. The question is, fam, has this ever, and somebody asked me this stuff, have we ever seen anything like this in other countries that we went to? Take a look, fam. Here we go. 4.5 million views. Now they're trying to make it look like Kerry Lake was the one who was causing problems. I'm going to mute us up, guys. We still got a lot of people watching. We're going to do our election report. Guys, get on over to Rockfin. Do a like over there. Do a share. If you got a few bucks you want to help us out, leave a Super Ray contribution. You can do the same thing. Rumble Rants, we're hanging out over there. And, of course, our YouTubes. Jilly Love, Lucky Burrito. Share those links out there. Those are our wrenches. We love you. Take a look at what happened over here. I'm going to remove this comment real quick. This was in Maricopa yesterday, fam. Who would have thought?
Of course, I know everybody wants to make sure that it reads and everything is fine.
Can you repeat that?
I can promise
Can
you.
Can you start from the beginning and repeat that?
So what happens is we have two tabulators. One of the tabulators is not working, okay? The other tabulator is taking about 75% successful. So 25% of them are being misread, and it could be a printer issue, or it could be the tabulator itself. So when it's misread, you have an option to put it into what's called box 3, and it gets read, whether it goes downtown and gets read manually, or whether it gets refed into our tabulator.
You don't want to adjudicate.
They get read,
No.
okay? So no one's trying to deceive anybody.
Of course not. Not on election day. That would never happen, right? No, that would never happen.
So the questions are, you guys. Sure.
If I get up there and that happens to my ballot, can I take my ballot with me and go somewhere else?
You do not leave the premises with a ballot. Sorry, and there's not like
Because I don't trust to go in a box. The box may never be
No,
down there.
no way.
All the time.
The choice is,
I'll come back.
the choice is to wait until.
And the worst part is the guy right there, he doesn't know much about anything either. He probably got a day or two max of training, not even. Yeah. We know this because we've seen this happen before.
The average training time in Vegas, fam, was 2 hours. You got a 2-hour section. That's when I asked him the thing. And the whole thing about it is that first of all, I don't know if that's a tabulator or if it's a tabulator and a signature verification. I don't know what it does. But like they're talking about when it goes into the box 3, and they show this later on in another one where they have the machine where you're supposed to put it in there. And if it doesn't work, you go into box 3. Now, if it doesn't work, your shit out of Shinola, you have to put it in box 3. You can't take it with you. You can't rip it up. That's considered your voting. So if it doesn't work, you're stuck with that thing right now. Either put it in the box or throw your vote away, and you get no vote. But what they were talking about is there's no proper chain of custody. They're taking it out of that location and counting it somewhere else in a central location. Where it's cast, it's not counted. That's one of the rules of Pasta's 6 rules of principles. Where it is cast, it must be counted, fam. Everywhere we've been, from Nicaragua to Brazil, where it's cast, is it counted?
Yeah. Yeah. Except here. And also, I'm just having this comment was talking about, yeah, but they verify the signature. No, they don't. No, they don't. There's not somebody there verifying the signature.
Okay.
9 times out of 10, it's a machine doing it.
Yes.
And the machine is literally, you can control how that it could over verify the signature, meaning it could verify any signature, or you could make it impossible to verify a signature, meaning it'll throw away the vote. Literally, it's a machine doing it. It's not people doing it.
Yeah.
It's a fucking machine.
And
Just
we
so
saw
you
it in
know,
LA, by the way.
signature verification is completely useless when it's done by a machine.
Yeah. I mean, it could be possibly okay, but not what we were seeing with these machines. And it's not multiple parties sitting there and looking at me and Johnny. And we should probably dig this up. We had an episode with Whitney Webb. Whitney Webb was talking about the new dominant company who has, I think it was called Periscript. And I think it's this company that has these signature verification machines.
Yeah.
Dark company, private equity, evil times. But they had found that they were turning down the level as far as the checking on what percentage. So in other words, if you turn down the level of signature verification, that you can almost get a scribble through, fam. It's ridiculous.
Yep.
And me and Johnny went down and witnessed it in LA, and we saw it with our very own eyes. It's just like a factory. It's a machine. So the person who did say, oh, they have signature verification. No, they do not. And that's how a lot of people fucking approach elections. And it really drives me crazy. They have this blind trust that somebody's doing it right, that somebody's doing what we need to do. And that's the programming of I hate to, here I go. I'm going to bite my own words. That's the programming of capitalism, right?
Hey, I'm working on him. To all the markets, I'm working on him.
But you guys blame everything on capitalism. That volcano,
but
capitalism.
it's
But
not
that's
just
the programming.
the program.
And think that it's done right because they're going to do it right because they want your business. They don't have to do it right. Go ahead, fam.
But guys, this is my issue with a lot of people who call themselves, communists and all this stuff. Guys, you guys talk about, oh yes, but the problem is corporatism and then and capitalism, blah blah blah. But yeah, but guys, so you believe, and this is the same rationale that I use for COVID. You believe that the government that overthrows countries, presidents, regimes all over the world, that literally lies to you about literally everything in history, lied to you about their participation in World War II, lied about, the interventions in Iraq, in Afghanistan, lied to you about weapons of mass destruction, lies to you of what they teach you in school, that lies to you about everything, is going to not lie to you about elections, which elect those in power, who make the rules and who are in charge. Do you really think that an empire that has maintained itself for so long, for almost a life of now an empire, right? It's time for it to, according to all the statistics, and empires last what, like 200, 300 years, I think it is. So it's getting to be that time. So do you really think that this empire isn't going to lie to you on that? It's the same logic that I use when it comes to COVID. Do you really think that the country that's lied to you about everything else is really not going to lie to you about this when they're making so much money? Yeah. No, it doesn't make any sense. I don't understand the rationale behind people who think that, oh, yes, this is the most corrupt country. We live in an oligarchy. The two-party system is corrupt. These politicians are all awful. Our military is evil. Our police are evil. But yes, our elections are fair. It doesn't make any sense.
There's too much at stake for them to put that up for risk. Too much at stake for them to put that at risk. Fam, I'm going to play a little clip of Biden. some important,
God.
crazy wins yesterday, just so we know. And he's going to say, listen, everybody thought there was going to be this big red wave. I'm like, how are you going to be a big fucking red wave when you have Democrats controlling elections in their own cartelish kind of areas, right? Like we say this all the time. It's like a cartel. Like you stay in your area, I'll stay in my area. We don't go at each other. You just control your area. Make sure a third party doesn't get 5% of the vote. By the way, no Green Party candidates on the ballot in Las Vegas and most of Nevada. No Green Party candidates on the ballot in a lot of places in New York. A couple here and there. Dominated by libertarians. Libertarians got on the stage in Georgia. Libertarians got on the stage in where else did they get on the stage too as well? I forgot. Several libertarians got on the stage for some big debates. So I mean, there is a third party, and it is that party, but they better get their shit together because there has been no campaigning. Like, you know how Biden and Obama hit the road and they went out and campaigned? Libertarians been able to do that shit right now. Some of the populist people like Dave Smith, Justin Amash, Spike Cohen, get off your butts and go campaign with these people in 2024 once you guys decide what's going on. I know you're a decentralized party, but you're on the ballot. We need some action from you guys. What is it saying, fam?
Can you read it?
There
really is no broad conspiracy.
At the polls. Okay. It's shit that happens before we get to the polls to vote that is nefarious. I'm
so
sorry.
If you think you live in a nefarious country, what makes you think that there's nothing going on at the polls? You have no evidence. You can't prove to me that there's nothing going on at the polls. But I can at least give you evidence like we just showed that there is.
Please.
You can't prove to me that the elections are you can't. Because you can't look into the machines. You can't show anything. So you can't say that.
At all. Let's play Joe talking about the lack of the red wave. Some of the big losses yesterday for them. Fetterman can't put two sentences
Fetterman
together.
won.
He won. Big loss for Dr. Oz for the Reds. Right now, Kerry Lake is in a tough battle. What other? Gavin Newsom steamrolled, of course, in California because that's the most ridiculous thing that California can't get a decent candidate together on the ballot. But that just shows you what it is. Hey, let's listen to Joe. Joe to go meet at this climate summit and then move over to Indonesia. He's going to be in the same room with Putin and Xi Jinping on this trip. Lord help us.
While any seat lost is painful, some good Democrats didn't win the last night. Democrats had a strong night. And we lost fewer seats in the House of Representatives than any Democratic president's first midterm election in the last 40 years. And we had the best midterm for governors since 1986. While any seat lost is painful.
That's the calmest and clearest I've ever heard him say in a long time. And he's right. With all the disasters that Joe Biden has pretty much handed the United States everyday citizen, inflation, high gas prices, lack of jobs, still forcing on COVID protocols, a war in Russia, censorship, lack of freedom of speech, going after Second Amendments with red flag laws, right and left situations, even if you're a leftist, the failure to codify Roe v. Wade or whatever the How, fam? How? Ladies and gentlemen, how? Who the hell is voting for Katie Hobbs? Who the hell is voting for Gavin Newsom?
There's a lot of brainwashed people, but I definitely think that you can't trust anything in these elections at all. And I think that fundamentally, most Americans know that their elections aren't real. In fact, most people that are my friends that are not political say, well, I don't vote because it doesn't count. They straight up tell me that. I've been saying this for years. They literally straight up tell me that. So most people don't trust our election system, and with good reason, because it isn't a fair election system, whether it's back of the house or front of the house, right?
Yep.
Like whether it's the long lines, the machines that don't work, the bullshit that happens like that, or the machines internally. The fact that they can easily be hacked, the fact that there's no chain of custody, the fact that we don't have audits, that we don't have real signature verification, all that stuff. We don't have, a holiday to vote or a weekend that we have. You can go vote anywhere. in Nicaragua and in a lot of these countries we've been to, Honduras, Colombia, if you don't register ahead of time, and if you are living somewhere else and you move and you don't change your address ahead of time, you have to go vote where you were at. And period. You can only go vote there. Not only can you only go vote there, you can only go vote in the room assigned in the building. And if you are a person that's disabled, they will do whatever it takes to get you there, to get you to that room.
Yeah.
But the room doesn't move for you.
Yeah.
You move for the room. It's that extreme. I'm not saying we have to be that extreme.
Hey, I saw it yesterday, fam. I saw it yesterday. Someone in Iraq, and they moved into the front of the line. There was somebody with a baby. They let him in. There was another person with a baby. I went right over to the election official. I said, "There's a baby here outside. It's really cold. Why don't you skip them in?" They moved them right in. They were like, "So thank you so much." I'm like, "Yeah, you know what I'm saying? We'll make that shit happen." That's it. By the way, other big red wins yesterday. I think the biggest red wins was JD Vance beating Tim Ryan in Ohio for a Congress seat, and right now Herschel Walker taking Raphael Warnock to Brink in the senator race in Georgia. Mr. Kemp also won the governor race, beating Stacey Abrams for the 75th time. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
they haven't stopped
it's just ridiculous. I mean, I really don't, to me, it doesn't make a difference. And I forget who it was said that, oh yeah, was it Stolberg? It was somebody that was like saying like, yeah, this isn't going to change anything. It's not going to change the U.S. position on Ukraine. So it doesn't matter. We have slightly more Republicans now in the
House
Senate, I believe, and in the House.
And very little bit. It is, but it's the uniparty. We know that. Guys, I'm going to read some Super Rays and get us out of here. Fam, we'll do that next section on Friday. I'm not going to put anything else in the doc. We'll just go over that stuff because that's an important conversation I want to have. I'd like to have some guests on to talk about that too as well. I wanted to talk about Fam because I know Fam has a big spiritual history about her or whatnot. And she kind of went from the spiritual realm to the political realm, where I went from the sports realm to the political realm. That's been our journey to get where we're at. But there is this kind of talk about, like, some of my new friends that I've met, people like Laura Loomer, who I met at this election event, we've talked to about, and who else? The whole mainstream media, as far as pushing back against Iran, saying that this was a women's revolution against the religion. And so you hear a lot of people who will say, conservatives and friends of mine who, hey, man, the problem with Sharia law and the Muslims is, they're anti-women, they're anti-gay, they're not about human rights. And, we know a lot of Muslim people, some of the most peaceful people in the world. I mean, Muhammad Ali used to say Islam means peace. And I want to compare it to it. And I have this great clip from the West Wing. We'll talk about it on Friday. Well, this will be more about a discussion rather than reporting and news about, well, what about, the Jewish religion? What about the Christianity religion? As a Christian, I know the Old Testament has some really dark, fucked up shit in it. So why is it okay for you as a Christian that you can separate that from modern times and modern standards, but you don't think that Muslims can separate some of what's...
Are you really asking why?
That's the conversation I want to have.
U.S. exceptionalism, Western exceptionalism.
Fam, I want you to wait.
Always has been.
Fam, I want you to wait until Friday. We'll have that discussion then, because it's important, because we have some things to discuss, because it is in the news right now with the Iranian situation. So we will discuss that a little bit on Friday, and we'll play some clips, and we'll have a fun time on it. Let me read the Super Rays to get us out of here. Arthur Carter, fam, says, hi, Convo Couch. You rock. No, Arthur, you rock. MS Harlem, thank you for the Super Ray contribution, fam. Look, it is always appreciated on the couch. Chris Leone, not that I support Dems in any way. As a matter of fact, it's the first election I've sat out, but I'm happy that the Republican didn't get their red wave. As an LGBT man, that makes me very happy, and it's probably the only thing I disagree with you guys on. I agree with the LGBT agenda, sorry, but that's where I stand as a person who has suffered bullying, and I don't want anyone else to suffer that. Fam, why don't you tackle that comment real quick? I'm going to see if I can put it up on our thing. But what are your thoughts about that, as far as conservatives, how they feel about the LGBT community? And is it now than it was back in the days?
Well, that wasn't the question about concern. Well, I guess.
Well, no, he said
well,
he
let me
wasn't happy about a red wave.
Yeah, well, conservative have used that issue just like the left has used that issue and weaponized it. Both sides weaponize it. What we're talking about the issue being used for regime change, right? We're talking more about the trans issue and the way that it is being plastered on everybody as something that you have to agree that trans women are women, and you have to agree that trans men are men, and you have to agree that everybody should be allowed to have surgery, and you have to agree that children should be allowed to have surgery, and you have to agree on all these things that if you don't agree with that, then you're a TERF, or you're anti-trans, or you're this. Like, and people have varying opinions on it. Personally, if you want to talk about LGBT issues, I don't believe people are straight. I believe everybody is, and this is me personally, I believe everybody is on a wave, and most of us, lean one way or the other, but some people are both. I have a very liberal view on that. What I don't like is people forcing others to adopt a sort of supremacist stance on that when it comes to like trans issues, where literally, for example, it'll be like we need to pay for these surgeries, but literally nobody has healthcare. So why is this a priority? Why is this being talked about so much by the left and the right? Well, because it's a wedge issue that really divides people and gets people really emotionally riled up. I did a conversation when we had it with Kim, right, where I said I've met trans people that literally have wanted at a very young age to transition, and if I was a parent and that was my kid, I would have to go through a process and see. But like, there are people that are born unisex. There are people that have these conditions. Do I think it's prevalent? No, I don't. I do think the issue, though, just like Latinos and Black people and minorities and the LGBTQ community is one that is also weaponized and tokenized by the Democratic Party to push an agenda. And it's also tokenized now by the right to push the counter culture to it. So people get stuck on this counterculture of it. When it comes to what we were talking about with Dawn, is the vast majority of people who are on the left in Latin America and Russia, in these countries that consider themselves Marxists, are very conservative when it comes on social issues. It's just a reality. And because of that, what happens is the West pushes this Western liberalism onto that in order to get the youth to revolt and overthrow the government. And we've seen that happen in Russia. The attempts with Navalny, we've seen it happen, and attempts on that in Cuba. It failed, but we've seen the attempts. We see it happen all the time. We're seeing it right now in Iran. We're seeing the same issue of women's issue be weaponized again to push regime change. Are there people who are young there, as we had two guests talking about Iran, two women, who want more of a liberal sort of existence? Yeah. But is it as overwhelming as the West is pushing? No. Yeah. And the same thing we've seen happen in Hong Kong. We see it all the time. And the one thing I will mention is Nicaragua is really good at throwing these people, like throwing this shit out. They're good at educating the youth. But otherwise, the youth, Gen Z, that's really on the phone all the time, that's young and like literally are getting their news by bits, like blurbs, 30 seconds, 20 seconds, minute. Like, they get a lot of this propaganda, and that the real opposition to this propaganda isn't strong enough in these mediums. We also get censored a lot. So that's where that is coming from. It's not coming from, oh, we're anti-LGBT. I'm by no means anti-LGBT. Like I just said, I don't believe in straight people necessarily. And I just think like there's this whole idea that you have to be like a certain way, and if you don't promote these issues constantly, if you don't use identity politics constantly, then you must be against it. I think what some conservatives are misled to think that everything is about every LGBTQ person is literally a pedophile, and I think that's wrong and ridiculous. That every show, when you have a burlesque show or a show where they have these drag queens, that it's all bad. No, it's like they just don't want propaganda to
I
people who
think
are
it's
young, like children,
I think
who
I think
who
it's
are
a
not
children's
ready
show. Yeah,
to be
it's a children's show.
sexualized.
Yeah.
Yeah, in that way. And I agree with that. I mean, I think there's an age for that. And I think we need to stop, promoting these things to kids. But again, that's also my opinion. And I'm not going to go around and force my opinion on everybody. And I think both the right and the left, or the liberals, really are trying to force their opinions on each other, and it's really affects such a small sector of the population. I'm against this idea that we have to attack gay people for who they love or anything like that. I think it's ridiculous. I think it's wrong. I think it's we're progressing and evolving that way. But I'm also against Americans and Westerners telling other countries how they should be and that they should be where we are. And I think that is also what allows interventionism and American exceptionalism.
I think the biggest issue when it comes to a lot of conservatives, and related, that's the whole thing, my man Chris, or Mr. Leone. It's the fact that I think there's been this stigma that a lot of conservatives were not cool with gay people or children being gay, and I think there was a time that was very hard, but I think they have evolved, and I think a lot of people, and what I've seen, like conservative family members, it's the Harvey Milk thing. Go over and call your uncle, call your father, call your cousin, let them know that you're gay. The more they know that we're involved with their family, the more open they'll be. And I believe they had that time. I think it's just the trans issue when it's pushed upon kids is what their biggest issue is. And that's the problem they have. And I think that it has been weaponized by the left, the Democratic, the American left, to lean on people's feelings and thoughts and whatnot. And really, to tell you the truth, at the end of the day, they don't give a shit about you, the Democrats, as far as you being gay and whatnot. They're not going to protect you more. And I think it's biased in itself to think that all gay people think alike, that gay people can't be conservative.
There's not a monolith.
It's really, I think that's even more degrading. And I think that's where conservatives are better than Democrats or liberals when it comes to that. The liberals in America, they seem to only care that you're gay if they can use and exploit you. If they can't do that, then they don't give a shit about you. And really, to tell you the truth, how many gay people were killed in Russia and all these other countries, in the Ukraine and Eastern Ukraine? How many gay people? I mean, really, to tell you the truth, at the end of the day, if you're anti-imperialism, right, then if you're pro-imperialism and you're okay with it, then you're anti-gay, because there are a lot of gay people getting killed in these wars anyways as well. Also, too, I want to put this one up right here. This was from Jonathan. Really appreciate your convo on voting. Guys, we really appreciate these tips. They mean a lot. We got a nice little love in the Convo Couch, givesendgo.com, Convo Couch /Brazil. Let me put that up there really quick, too, as well, because somebody left some love, and that's still active because we're still recovering from Brazil.
Yeah.
And the last Super Ray, really quick. ARM, fam.
ARM. Thank you, ARM. Thank you all for tuning in. Great show today. Appreciate y'all. We clipped the Jimmy Dore show, and then there's another clip there you guys can watch on Russia as well. We will always bring you the Russia stuff because I'm here. So
is that why, fam?
Yeah, fam. Yeah, I call up Putin and he's like, "Hey, huh?
You got anything interesting going on? Any shows you're on? Anything new lately? I know you're going seeing Russia with.
Oh, I did.
You
I did something on.
You didn't even bring the article, fam.
What article?
The article they attacked you.
Oh yeah, you want to?
We'll bring it on Friday, right? We'll bring it up.
Bring it up. The Washington Post wrote an article about me. Well, it wasn't about. It was basically trying to tie Elon to Putin, and because me, Margarita, the editor-in-chief of RT, and Rachel were the ones basically saying, "Why are we shadow banned, Elon? If you care so much about free speech, unshadow ban us." They were like, the prominent faces of RT are begging or asking Elon Musk. And it wouldn't be surprising if Elon Musk would do that. He is partial to Russian media. It was just, the Washington Post, of course, had to But it was funny. We were like, oh, okay, I guess we're,
Fam, it's called WAPO.
Yeah.
Hooah! That's it for today, ladies and gentlemen. Help us on out if you can. Go to our Rockfin, sign up for the monthly subscription for $9.99. We don't put anything against the paywall, but that $9.99 to us will mean that you get free range on the platform for anybody's premium content. So if you want to see some of Eddie Bravo's or Sam Tripoli's or Jimmy Dore's or anybody else on that platform, pay for us. You get their shit for free. That's how you send love and help to Democracy Dies in Donbass. WAPO. That's how you send your love to the Convo Couch. That's it, guys. We'll see you back on Friday. Fam, let everybody know we're leaving.
Fam, bye, guys. Good night. I'm tired. I will post a video or something about what I just did on RT.
Bye.